Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first episode of An Average PC Reviews, where I, your humble neighborhood gamer, use my average PC to have a look at and review games and just exactly how they will run on said average PC. So, if you're ever unsure on whether to buy a game because you're not sure if it's going to run, and let's face it, not everyone really runs top of the line PCs, well, look no further than right here. So today, I'm having a look at the game called Prey. Now, you may or may not have heard of this game. It is a AAA title that was just released only a couple of weeks ago now. The problem was, and I guess still is, was that there really wasn't any marketing behind this game. Before its release anyway. So there was really not much hype to go along with it either. And that's really all down to Bethesda's recent policies in regards to that kind of stuff over the recent years. You may have seen it after it's come out though. It has been getting quite a lot of attention since then. However, if they had have done it before, well, they probably would have gotten a lot more attention. Now, it's actually developed by a company called Arkane Studios, which you may not remember. Are the same people who actually brought everyone Call of Duty World at War, Bioshock 2, and both Dishonored 1 and 2 as well. In fact, you actually probably will notice some of the similarities between both Prey and Dishonored games, in terms of art style anyway. The way people look and their design is very, very similar to that of Dishonored. And, well, yeah, if you do play it, you will definitely notice the similarities anyway. Although, much like really any other game, don't let the art style alone fool you. They are pretty different. Good reasons, of course. Well, most of the time. Anyway, let's start off by having a look at the options in the game. So, first things first, we have gameplay, game. So we've got subtitles. So we can go all dialogue, we can turn them off completely, or just the main dialogue. So it's fairly self-explanatory. Underneath that, we've got tutorials and prompts. So you can have nothing on if you've played through it or you just want to try and figure things out yourself. Sure, go nuts. Non-tutorial prompts only, or both tutorials and prompts. Vibration, turn that on and off if you've got a controller. It's a bit weird. It's under this section and not under controls, where the rest of the controller options are, but oh well. Camera bob, self-explanatory, head bobbing up and down. Camera roll, you can change that from 100 to 0 for both the bob and the roll. And hit damage as well, which is actually kind of a nice touch. You can actually see how much damage you're doing to an enemy when you hit them. Again, self-explanatory. Interactive screens. We have cursor speed. So when you're playing the game, when you're either looking at a computer or a keypad or some kind of touch screen, kind of keeps it in game rather than opening up a whole new screen, but you can still control it on the pad or the computer itself while still in game. So this would be what the interactive screen is referring to. So cursor speed, it's automatically set at 20, or at least it was for me. I found that's pretty much perfect, spot on, but you can actually, again, move it all the way up to 100 or down to 0, whatever it takes your fancy. Here we've got the auto-examine options. So we can auto-examine basic screens, workstations, security stations, keypads, keycard readers, fabricators, and operator dispensers. So these are all pretty much the same kind of option. As soon as you go up to it and go to start entering into it, examine is when you zoom in on it. Zoom in on the screen and you pretty much just see that. You don't see anything in your field of view at all. So you can turn them on or off, which, I mean, this is all actually pretty nice for an option, but purely doesn't really make too much of a difference on gameplay. Under controls, look, the controls, or key bindings anyway, are fairly basic. So you've got your movement, your use buttons, your attacking, all the, I guess, standards. One gripe I probably did have was inventory was actually set to I. I didn't particularly like having to reach over the other side of the keyboard for that, so personally I changed that, but, you know, each to their own, of course. You can alter your quick selects, so that's your hotbar essentially, and your keypad is, well, they're the numbered keypad, so if you're actually entering into a code into a keypad, you can actually use your number pad. But apart from that, I mean, it doesn't actually let you change anything like your quick save or quick load or anything like that, which is kind of disappointing. There's a couple of other things which, you know, you might come across that you can't change, so it is, again, fairly basic. Mouse settings, very, very small and basic here. You can invert the Y-axis, which I personally find a little odd for a mouse. That's generally something you'd get for a controller only, but, you know, some people might like that. Mouse sensitivity, I've got it down to 10. Again, it can go all the way up to 100, whatever you fancy. I'm actually finding, surprisingly, 10 is probably really, really nice at the moment. It might even be a bit too fast. I'd hate to see what it's like on 100, because that would probably just make me quite ill watching it. Controllers, a couple of here. So inverting Y-axis, yes, on or off. That's fairly standard when it comes to controllers. Sensitivity, that's actually quite unusual. A good unusual, though. I don't think I can remember too many games where you've got a controller where you can actually set the sensitivity on said controller. So, yep, props to that. Always use controller prompts. It does have Steam controller support. As it says, it requires a restart if you pop it on. So if you've got a Steam controller, it will actually support that. And the controller map, so you can actually see what does what, which is, yeah, kind of nice. But again, pretty much all games that have controllers really should have that kind of map at least. Under videos, okay, so this is the interesting one. Well, I say interesting, but it's actually a little lacking. I mean, to be fair, this did come out on multiple platforms at the same time, but then again, at the same time, really, they should be putting more into the video options. Anyway, so we've got monitors. You can select which monitor you want, 1 or 2. Resolution, I'm running at my 1920 by 1080, which is what my average monitor is, well, supports. You can choose display modes, window, full screen, and borders windowed, which is always nice. Vertical sync on and off, of course. Brightness, you can modify the brightness settings. I've found it's fairly okay as is. Some corners might be a little darker than usual, or than what you would think they would be, but that's actually a different option that we can probably get into in a moment. And then we've got presets. So we can go low, medium, high, things like that. So, oops. I do not want to cancel that. So cancel that. Apply changes, cancel. Alright, advanced settings. Alright, so object details. So as I said, it's actually fairly sparse. We've just got object details. You can set that to the standard low, medium, high, and very high. Shadow quality is exactly the same. So you've got low, medium, high, very high. Texture quality, again the same. Low, medium, high, and very high. And now we've got anisotropic filtering. So we can start off with 2 times. It does double that every time, going up to 16 times. And then we've got anti-aliasing. Now, you can have it off completely. Probably wouldn't recommend it, but it does have FXAA, SMAA 1X, and then the 1XT and 2XTs. So it's a bit weird that they've just got the 1X there. But again, for probably machines that can't handle it. Otherwise, I would probably recommend going up to the SMAA 2TX, sorry. Just because it seems to run things a little better anyway. Now we've got screen space directional occlusion. This is something you don't see very often in, well, really anything. I can't remember the last time I did see this. From what I understand, it's I don't want to say fairly new, but it's slowly starting to get out there. So now, what this essentially is, it's a new form of ambient occlusion. So it accounts for the direction of incoming light from sources, and pretty much tries to work out how that light's going to look. You know, it includes bouncing off indirect illumination as well, and you know, it tries to complement standard objects with illumination and things, whatnot as well. So, in other words, you might have a corner that's otherwise very, very dark. Like I mentioned earlier with the brightness settings, I was looking at a corner that would seem unusually dark for, whatever reason. There seemed to be, a moderate amount of light on there, and it shouldn't have been like as dark as it was. This kind of thing will actually merge the darkness and the light just that much more to make it just seem natural. So with this as well, you can have it off completely, which is what I had originally. You can keep it onto half resolution and full resolution, which we'll go through in a little bit as well. Now, last but not least, we've got screen space reflections. This option was not an overly pleasant one, at least for me, with this game. So if you don't know what this is, it alters the appearance of objects on surface materials. So if you imagine objects reflecting off a pool of water, something like that, this is what it does. So again, the options, you can keep it off half resolution or full resolution. The only problem I have with this is the screen space reflections seems to bug out this particular game. So when I'm facing a certain direction in certain rooms, the entire screen or the entire game turns black, and every surface is very, very shiny, apart from light sources, so it adds quite a bit of an odd effect to things. Otherwise, if I've got it on half resolution, there's many, many pixels everywhere. That might be a driver thing. However, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't something I was willing to look too far into, just because it doesn't add too much to the game. And I'll point it out, a bit later on, because it's not overly too noticeable anyway. And last but not least, with our options, we do have, no, we don't want to play, our audio. Pretty bare as well. You've just got music volume, speech volume, and effects volume. That's it. Alright, so, first things first, what we're going to do is I'm going to jump into the presets, so our low, medium, and high, and I'll show you guys just the difference between all of these. Okay, we're back in our main character's office from the, it's fairly early on in the game at this point when you get here. I've got this save set onto our low preset. So as you can see in our quality and details, everything is set to low. The anisotropic filtering is 2 times, and everything else is off. It's pretty much the lowest of the low. So when they say it is a preset for low, they really aren't kidding. So as you may or may not be able to notice, you can actually notice edges around objects are a little, jagged, as you would expect. I mean, even looking at some of this, the quality of the textures, they are, well, low. I mean, it's a low setting. This is pretty much what you expect. The colors are still quite good. Yeah, the only real problem is everything is quite jagged. You'll notice on some of the guns. So, for instance, the shotgun I have in my hands here, probably closer in by the hands and towards the end. Well, the back of the gun itself, it's actually quite. Well, it's not detailed at all, so that's something. You'll notice reflections off where it's registering my bullets, so it's still got a bit of that, which is not bad. We've got some plants here, so I mean this actually all looks pretty good, even on low setting. It's actually fairly nice. Looking outside like that, again, it's very jagged. So, but again, the colors are nice. So if we jump down here, I'll show you some of the lighting effects while it's still daytime anyway. So there is kind of like a day-night cycle in this. You'll notice right there some of these shadows are flickering. Now that would be because of some of the direction occlusion that is turned off. It does generally fix. You'll also notice the edges of the shadows are extremely blurred here. And it just kind of looks like a bit of white noise on the edge of each one, but this is what you get. You'll notice some of this as the sun comes down. The shadows themselves will be moving, so that's always a nice touch at the same time. But remember when I said earlier that the reflections themselves probably won't make too much of a difference? Well, this is what I mean. They aren't generally bad anyway. Even with the lower setting on, some of the reflections are quite nice, and having them turned up to the highest, well, it's not something you're really going to notice too much anyway. Looking up at some of this signage here, I mean that's just kind of the aesthetic, but that's not really going to change too much. If we look up here, you can see some of the effects on this main elevator that we have in the middle here. It's not as probably pronounced.
Join us in congratulating Dr. Lorenzo Calvino, winner of the Employee Innovation Award this quarter.
Well, good for him. Anyway, okay, so another thing to notice is these parts over here. So these monuments and whatnot, the effects again are dramatically reduced on these. They are generally quite more pronounced than normal anyway. So again, just have a look at some of these guns that we've got here. You can see that even in the light, they're very bland and they are very, very basic. So that is essentially what you get for your low quality. Right. It's time to check out just exactly how the combat looks and handles. So I'm coming into volunteer testing here. And I did check it out recently just to see if there was... There we go. There's an enemy over there, so I can scan him if I want. Otherwise... Hey, hello. So you can see the effects on the combat are still actually fairly nice. I'm going to... Even that looks fairly basic. But that's that with the shotgun. Let's try this. Oh, shit. Okay. So, he's a lightning fellow. And he keeps breaking my weapon. Okay. Oh, shit. Take that. And we just send him exploding up in the air and shoot him one last time. So yeah, so look, there's blood splatter from the aliens. You've got their body's just down here, and this Phantom, the Voltaic Phantom, as you can see, is slightly larger bodies, but yeah, I mean, it's what you expect on low. It actually looks fairly good for low, considering some of the other things. Not so much, you know, your textures and whatnot are set to low, of course. Whereas this, I guess, probably because it's a bit more fast-paced, you won't notice it as much. It's still, there's a reflection of a face in there, which I don't know where it's coming from. Anyway, let's move on to our medium preset. Right, now we've got the medium preset set on. As you can see, it's a little better. I mean, it's definitely, I feel, a noticeable difference from low to medium. And from what I've noticed as well, it really doesn't take too much of a drain on any of the resources for your PC either. So you can actually play on medium at the very least quite comfortably without having any kind of hitching or, you know, huge frame drops or anything like that. You can still see that, you know, there's a bit of jaggedness to some objects, but you'll notice that whereas before in the carpet, well, hopefully you could notice that the carpet was quite jagged around the edges, whereas now it's more or less gone. It's super noticeable, like it's tiny, but it's probably a bit noticeable if I sit there and stare at it. So now if we go over to our shotgun, you can see it's a little bit better, not too much better. Even if we grab this, see, even this gun is called the Q-beam. Even this is, you know, 100 times better looking so far. So the jump from low to medium seems to be fairly high, if that makes sense. Yes. Anyway, looking at our shadows here, now you can see there's still that probably bit of a wobble there. That would be because if we go into videos, looking at advanced, everything's set to medium. The anisotropic filtering is at 4 times. We're now set at the FXAA. The screen space directional occlusion is set off, and the screen space reflections is at half resolution. So it's this directional occlusion that'll affect the shadows from light and whatnot, whereas this will actually affect reflections on other objects and whatnot. So again, the shadow hasn't changed at all, and that would be because of the directional occlusion. We can have a look, though some of the smaller shadows are probably looking a bit better. And once again, the reflections are one and the same. Looking up, see, this is actually a pretty good example. If we look up at this bridge here, if we look at it from a certain angle, you generally won't notice the jaggedness. If I move my camera up and down like this, you can definitely tell the difference. So you can definitely see how jagged it is along the railings there. So it's actually quite a big breaker. Like if you pick up on that kind of stuff, you probably will notice it. Although, given, you know, the fast-paced nature of some points of the game, it might not be that bad. When it slows down a bit, like I'm in the lobby of the main area here, and yeah, this kind of stuff you will notice. The signs, once again, as I said, you won't really notice any difference. You'll notice a tiny bit more of an effect on these things.
Good afternoon, Talos. Join us in congratulating Dr. Lorenzo Calvino.
Once again, it's that time again to congratulate this fellow. Good for him. So you can see, if we have a look here, I can't actually zoom in right now. Oh, that's because I was... We zoom in. Can I get a... No, I can't get a better look at it. So this is a piece of the creature, or one of the creatures that you fight. So you can notice, you know, there's quite a bit of detail on the said corpse. Actually, this is probably a better example down here. So you can actually see how it moves. It is a bit blurred ever so slightly, and that would just be because of, you know, the texture, or not the texture details, so the object details. That's nice. Right, combat time. Now let's have a look and see just how... Oop, forgot to sneak to make sure that we get up nice and close to use this. There is that mimic there, so let's shoot that. He's running away. Nope. Yeah, he's running away. Oh, shit. So, this phantom's right here. Let's... So you can see the effect is slightly larger to what it used to be. Let's try and use this beam on him. Nope, we just blasted through all of our ammunition, but look. So you can see the beam effect's quite nice, and let's hit him with a shotgun. And he explodes, so that's a nice fiery effect there. So again, the corpses are all very much more or less the same. Let's have a look for that last little mimic running around here. Oh, there he is. I think he's that chair. Not anymore. Okay. Well, that's pretty much combat more or less. You're not really going to notice too much. But let's move on to the high preset, and we'll see how we go from there. Right, back once again. This time, we're onto the high preset for the graphics options. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. So here we've got object details, shadow quality, and texture quality are all set to high. The filtering is set to 8 times, and the anti-aliasing is set to SMAA 2TX. Now, our directional occlusion is set to half, and our space reflections are also set to half. Now, if we have a look, so down at the carpets, so you'll notice that the texture quality of the carpet is actually 100 times better. So once again, it has made quite a big jump. You can actually notice there's even like some stains on the carpet and whatnot. So, and the edges, there's really no jaggedness when it comes to that. So looking at this chair here, once again, there's really no jaggedness. Looking up at the screen, look, there might be some slight jaggedness on the edges, especially while moving the mouse. And that would be, of course, simply because of the white background. It does tend to pronounce it quite a bit more. We have a look at our shotgun. You'll notice the details on, so the butt of the gun itself is actually, you know, quite a bit more detailed. It did take a second to load in, so I'll switch back. So let's find a bit of light. So let's jump down here. So I'll show you what I mean. So if we come into the light, so once it's loaded, it's probably not going to need to do it again. When we get to super high, you'll notice. Now here, so this is what kind of difference the directional occlusion makes. So here, there's none of this flickering with the shadows. If we have a look really close up, there's ever so slightly a kind of flickering, and we can see some over there. But apart from that, you know, the edges are probably a lot closer in, and not as blurred either. See, if we bring out the Q-beam, look, you can see, look, it's got extra details, and it's, you know, a much crisper, nicer quality. There's quite a bit more reflection in on that as well. So it makes quite a difference. Now, sitting in the lobby, this is all running actually quite nice. You'll notice up in the top right, I do keep my frames per second set up there. So I'm, you know, going between 59 and 60. It may potentially go over, but I've got VSync on, which we all know will do that. So here we've got, you know, the plants. They don't generally change too much in detail, and that's fine. So, but again, I've really got to push the fact that that occlusion really does help the shadows in the game. And from what I understand, it really doesn't chew up too much extra resource either. Even if you've got it on half resolution like it is now, it makes a world of difference. So that's something I would probably recommend to at least have on half resolution if you can handle it. If you've got a PC or something similar to mine, then it's definitely worth it.
From 12 to 2 p.m. Please refer to the weekly upgrade for today's menu.
Now, if we have a look at this bridge up here, we'll notice that that moving we had, where the rail themselves would get super jaggedy, is still there. However, again, once again, it's not as bad as it was previously. Looking at the effects, you notice that there's probably quite a bit more so far. That's just because, obviously, you're telling it that it can support it. We'll notice our sign here. Actually, look, to be honest, I think the writing's probably a little more clearer. So I guess trying to see it from a bit further away might make it a tiny bit easier. If you're blind like me, though, you're going to have to get fairly close anyway, which is all well and good. So, but apart from that, look, if we have a look at some of that's, I don't even know what that is. That's weird. So if we have a look at, yep, this down here, so we'll notice, you know, it's actually, this part of the Weaver corpse is actually slightly clearer now, which is, yeah, nicer. That's kind of what you want. Right, combat once again. Let's give this a shot, and we'll see just how much of a difference. Obviously, there's quite a bit of a difference when it comes to our surroundings. Oh, hello. So he's dead. So you notice, like, a lot of the wispiness and the death effect kind of hangs around probably for a bit longer. So, and well, that's pleasant. So we hit him. Is he going to open the door? So you can see the effects on him is definitely a lot more blurred, and it's making probably quite a bit of a difference. So that just knocked him down. Bugger off. Okay, so, and you know, there's a lot more of a blood spatter as well. So let's set this off again. So that one knocked him back. Ow. Okay. And let's set this off in front of him. So that makes probably, you know, quite a bit more of a bigger explosion as well. Okay, we can't use anything electronic around this guy, it seems. I want to try and use a glue cannon on him. And so we'll just see the effects on that. So look, you can see. Alright, so the wrench really isn't doing anything. So before I die, let's notice. See, yeah, again, once again, you've got probably a bit more of a wispy after death effect. Let's try and get him with a glue gun. Which one's the mimic? That one. Oh, where'd he go? Stop changing! Alright. He literally just ran around in a circle. Where is he going? There. So, but you'll notice as well, there's, you know, the effects on the screen. It adds up, so, and it makes a difference. Surprisingly, even sitting on high, not noticing too much of a performance drop, if at all. Which is surprising. I think the more you explore explore, and the more you come across large enemies, there are some enemies that will send out, you know, I guess kind of minions, or they will have minions or something like that. And that tends to drop the quality down just slightly, but so far, running even on high in the middle of combat, it tends to run fairly well. So, last but not least is our very high preset, and we'll come back to that shortly. Now on to the very high preset. So, much how the low preset sets everything to the lowest possible, very high does the complete opposite. So it sets everything to very high. So we've got object, shadow, and texture quality is all set to very high. The filtering is set to 16 times, and our anti-aliasing is set to the 2TX rather than having it off. The directional occlusion is at full this time, so we should see probably at least a bit crisper when it comes to that shadow occlusion. And the reflections are also set to full as well. So, nope. So if we have a look at texture detail, so once again, our carpet, that hasn't really changed between high and very high. So, you know, some of the textures aren't going to be as noticeable. So, you know, looking at here, you're still going to get some kind of jaggedness, but once again, that is simply because of the backdrop behind it as well. Now, if we have a look at the shotgun, now just watch when I bring it up. I'll bring it up right now, and you can see exactly, it'll take, you know, a little bit to load in the texture. So here we go. And there you go. So it did take, you know, probably about, what, a second or so to actually load things in. And some things, there will be a bit of popping like that as well, especially on this level. So now that we're back down here, let's check out these shadows, and I'll show you the difference. So here we go. So we've got, you know, pretty much no flickering with the shadows whatsoever. And it's probably about as blurred as you would expect around the edges. But it's... oh. We'll just leave her there. Anyway, so yeah. You can notice that the shadows themselves are, you know, quite clean. Not too much of a difference between half resolution and full resolution. So you can take your pick there. I guess if you can support the full resolution, might as well go for it. But if you are looking for probably a smoother ride, which, you know, that is what some people prefer. Some people prefer it to look nice and not run as well as it probably could. Whereas other people the other way, other people like a nice medium. Me, I prefer it to probably run a bit nicer than looking super fantastic. But again, that's me. So if we have a look at this bridge up here, now you'll notice we can tell the quality of the bridge itself is quite nicer. Moving around, it does still get a bit jagged, but it doesn't last as long, so even while moving, it only lasts probably a second before it tries to fix itself. So the sign's probably about as good as we're going to get back on high. Looking at these kinds of effects, the effects really haven't changed too much either. So, look, if you're looking between high and very high, it's not going to be too much of a noticeable difference, to be perfectly honest. I'd probably just stick with high if you can support it. Otherwise, medium will do just fine. I've been playing on medium. I haven't noticed too much of a difference. Sometimes I'll change things to a high if possible, just, you know, just to see how things run. Let's have a look at this gun. So, again, the quality of the weapons doesn't vary too much from high to very high.
Lunch is served in the cafeteria from 12 to 2 p.m.
Okay, speaking of that, it's lunchtime, so let's go get something to eat. Okay, combat time, ladies and gentlemen. Once again. And it's time for us to see exactly what we can do and just how much our performance will drop. So once again, those after death effects hang around for even longer on very high, which is actually probably a bit surprising. I wasn't expecting that much. So let's try and explode this guy wherever he is. So he's here. Let's... Okay, so that didn't really seem to do too much to him. If we try and run away and get a good look at the effects that surround him, so we can hit him with a glue gun. And let's set this off to explode just in front of him. Yeah, so once again, all I can add is those wispy effects. Hang around probably even longer. If you like to have that extra bit of... Come here. Yeah, if you like that bit extra, then by all means go for it. Funnily enough, even on very high, I'm not noticing too much of a drop in... What the hell? Is he down here now? Oh no, he's still up there. Yeah, not noticing too much of a drop in performance. However, even with very high, I would probably not keep it on there. Because once you do start to explore a bit more, face more enemies, especially those enemies with minions, you're going to start seeing a lot of clunkiness. You're going to see a lot of dropped frames, and it's going to just affect your overall performance. Which, I mean, again, some people will prefer the nice effect over not. But personally, I like performance. Now that we've gone through all the presets, I will go through what I prefer is my custom options. Of course, you can always change this, but this is what I found to work for me. Everyone is different. Now, object details, I'd like to keep on high if possible. Shadow quality, not too much. We can keep that on medium. Or even keep it on high. Texture quality, I'm not bothered too much by, so we can keep that on medium as well. And the filtering, either 4 or 8 times, it's entirely up to you. The anti-aliasing, keeping it at 2TX, I find really doesn't make too much a difference in your frames per second, and it's probably the best you're going to get out of this game. The directional occlusion, I've said before, I keep it at half resolution, and the reflections I turn off altogether. While this time around, surprisingly, it hasn't broken the game, it does just seem to randomly do it. And so, friends, concludes the performance and graphics part of this video. Now, the question is this a good game? Short answer, yes. However, should you rush out and buy it now? Probably not. You'd be better off to wait until a sale. And I'll tell you why. Okay, for a AAA title, there's an awful lot of game-breaking bugs upon its release, and, you know, things like graphical issues. Now, between people's save files being corrupted, which I know has been fixed now, but there's a myriad of graphical issues as well. Frankly, for a AAA title, it should be more polished than this. While it's good to hear that, you know, they're trying to jump on it quickly and fix a lot of bugs shortly after release, we should be expecting better from someone as well known as Bethesda. If you're not aware of it, Arkane Studios is owned by ZeniMax, which owns Bethesda and a myriad of other kinds of, well, companies. But bugs aside, there are some deeper concerns I have about this game. For one, the story's pretty shallow and lacking, especially when it comes to what is happening around you. Look, don't get me wrong, I really do like the premise of the story. The fact that it's an alternate timeline with US and Russia joined together, and the end result being, well, eventually this, you know, private company in space. It's pretty cool. Now, yes, I know there is supposed to be a big twist after the credits. However, you shouldn't have to play through an entire game just to get to the twist. The story itself should catch you from the get-go and lead you on its journey. After the first hour or so in this game, it all just seems like it hasn't really gotten you anywhere useful, story-wise anyway. You're given one main objective, with a couple of other smaller objectives within that to achieve the main goal. And then throughout this time, your character just doesn't really interact with people like a normal person. They mainly just sit there, stare, and watch. Frankly, it's a little creepy. Speaking of creepy, let's talk about the Typhon, which, if you don't know, are the main enemies of the game. They're kind of dark, seemingly shadowy figures to begin with, at least, anyway. Now, the first few kinds of Typhon you find are definitely creepy. I recommend having the subtitles on, the full subtitles that is, because it means when they speak, you'll definitely know they're around. You just won't know exactly where. And that got to me probably a lot more than anything else. Look further on down the track, however, it seems like they didn't have enough time for most of the other kinds of enemies and just kind of copy and pasted what they already had, adding, different kinds of effects to them and whatnot. Still though, there is one enemy, the Mimic, which is the very first enemy you encounter, has got to be one of my favorite enemies I've come across in a game, at least recently anyway. What they do is they turn into the objects around them, perfectly mimicking said objects. The best part I've found is before you can obtain any kind of way to find out if an object is a mimic or not, apart from hitting it, of course, you sit there in a room full of objects with just some kind of slight hesitation on whether you want to go near anything or touch anything, because it very well could jump out and attack you at any damn moment. But with that being said though, if you're a pack rat or love stashing away items in Dishonored or Bioshock, well then, you'll probably be exactly like me and pick up every damn item that's not nailed down in this game. They've also implemented a recycling system, which is nice, although not wholly original. So rather than simply selling all the junk you collect, you can actually change them into materials which allow you to craft more useful items in the future. The only issue with this, and it's a big one, are the ratios of materials available compared to what it costs to make certain things seem really, really off. Or there's just not the right kind of material available or readily available. It's almost non-existent. It's so hard to come across certain materials sometimes. Now you might say, oh, it adds to the difficulty, or you just need to use stealth more so you don't use as many items. The only problem with that is the stealth system isn't exactly as fleshed out as it could be. And while you can use certain items to potentially distract enemies to make your way past, their AI isn't exactly the best either, and they won't generally wander off very far either. Even after they've, seen you and given chase, for example. So, like, if you start running away from an enemy that's seen you at least, and you hide behind a corner, rather than come look behind the corner most of the time, they'll just sit there and think, oh, he's no longer in my line of sight anymore. He must be gone. Then they'll go on their merry way. Combat, however, is definitely a lot better. The weapons feel as though they've had a lot of power behind them, which make it pretty satisfying to go on some kind of shooting spree. And watching how each enemy reacts to being attacked by you is definitely one of the more interesting sides of the combat as well. So, for example, some will, just bear down on you, sending arcs of electricity to disable some of your weapons. Some will move lightning fast around the map, faster than you can shoot at them anyway. In fact, some can't be seen altogether. Not only that, when you eventually do obtain your psychic powers, it does seem to add just another layer to the combat, with things like mind control or telekinesis, for instance. Although they really should have, honestly, they really should have introduced these powers into the story earlier, I feel. Just because it would have probably sped up the game just that bit more that it needed. And instead of, avoiding getting my ass handed to me by Typhon, I would have been actively seeking them out, wanting to try new powers on them. Unfortunately, though, this game just seems like a giant mix of mind-blowing psychic powers. Get it? And a bunch of annoying little quirks that make you think, why? Like, when using the scroll wheel to change weapon... Oh, wait! The scroll wheel opens the radial menu, not change your weapon. Why? Or the fact, the hotkeys for your consumables for health and psi energy can only be used from said radial menu, and they can't be changed. So it's small things like that that add up and can make a good game a great game, or vice versa. After all that's said and done, though, it is a good game. It's fairly fun, if it does even have a fairly slow start. The combat is definitely the more enjoyable side of it all. Will you get your value for money out of this? If you're on a budget, or if you're hoping it's, the one game you want to pick up? Well, let me ask you this. Do you enjoy searching through every single drawer, nook, and cranny to pick up everything you can? Then yeah, you'll probably get your money's worth. I mean, I've been doing that, and I currently have probably about 28 hours clocked on it so far. If you don't enjoy doing that and you just want to go through the story, or it generally doesn't sound like your idea of fun, I would probably wait until a sale to pick it up, just because it is fairly basic in that regard. And on that note, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.